Good morning everyone, hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be doing a video on a upper receiver of mine that I've been using for quite some time now. This is tied with my oldest upper receiver. This is of course my Bear Creek arsenal. This is my rifle length upper receiver, so it has a 16-inch barrel on it. And we're going to go ahead and talk about it after the 5,000 rounds that I've used on it, some of the things that have been good on it, some of the things that could be better on it, some of the wear and tear, and kind of do a detailed overview of all that's gone through it in the last 5,000 rounds. So really quickly, I bought this upper receiver about a year and a half ago. I bought it on Black Friday back in the day, and I believe I spent $180 on it delivered to my door. Now I know that due to the current pandemic that there are of course prices are increasing everywhere on pretty much everything. So if you try and find this upper right now on Bear Creek Arsenal's website, it is going to be slightly more expensive. I think it's just a little bit above $200 if you can find this exact upper. It is a more interesting upper, and there are a lot of things that I like about it and a few things that I don't necessarily fully like about it, but let's go ahead and get into what this guy is. So a 16-inch barrel, like I mentioned. It's chambered in 223 Wild, which is a really good chambering. It's a little bit more accurate than 5.56, maybe not quite as tough as 5.56, but it takes both 223 and 5.56 just as well. The barrel itself is a carbine length barrel, 1 in 8 twist. The gas system on it is a carbine length, which is a little unfortunate. I generally always prefer mid-length. The longer the gas system on the barrel, the better, generally speaking, just to smooth out the recoil impulse. But that being said, I do have a Cotton Arms adjustable gas block on here, so it is still fairly smooth. I have it set to run a little bit hot with M193, so if you see in the intro of this video, a lot of the stuff was M193, which is a little hot, and then some of the steel stuff, you can see it's ejecting about 330, and that's just to make sure that it runs everything I put through it. Now, in the year and a half that I've owned this, I've probably taken it out on 20 to 25 different outings, probably even a little bit more than that. Anything from 0 degrees outside, literally 0 degrees outside and snowing. I've probably taken it out 5 or 6 times in the snow, very, very cold, freezing temperatures outside, and it's functioned very, very well. And also 100-degree weather and rain and pretty much everything in between. I've thrown these uppers, I've submerged these uppers in water. I threw them in a stream, and I'll throw in footage of all this sort of stuff so you guys can see all that's been done to this guy. Now, I don't clean these guys all that much. I probably do a detailed cleaning every 500 to 1,000 rounds, and I do a fairly minimalistic cleaning, generally speaking, after I shoot them, though not always. That being said though, the only malfunctions that I've ever had with this guy have been self-induced. So for instance, when I originally put the gas block on, you know, you turn the gas setting off and it's not going to cycle. But that's self-induced, that has nothing to do with the gun, that's just me messing around with it. Now, something to mention about that is that from the factory, most Bear Creek Arsenal upper receivers are very, very over-gassed. Especially back when I bought this, it was ejecting everything at like 1 to 130, even steel was ejecting really far forward. So putting on an adjustable gas block and turning that down definitely makes it a lot smoother. Now, for the first 3,000 or 4,000 rounds, it was pretty much left on open. So it was only about the 3,000 to 4,000 round mark that I put on the adjustable gas block. So for the majority of its life, it has been run really, really hard with a lot of gas, which of course allows it to cycle anything, but it also is a little bit harder on the component. Now, for about 99% of its life, it's been mated to this Palmetto State Armory lower receiver. This is a lower receiver that I bought with it again on Black Friday. I think I spent $130 back on it back in the day. It has a really good trigger on it. It has the enhanced pulse trigger, and in the back here, I'm running an H1 buffer, I believe, and I'm running a Strike Industries flat wire recoil spring. So the overall recoil impulse on this guy is really tuned. So there's pretty much no recoil on it, even though I could turn the gas down a little bit more. Now, most of the time when I go shooting with a rifle on any given day, I'm going to bring a couple hundred rounds, generally anywhere from 6 to 10 magazines, and I'm going to pretty much run them through in about an hour to 2 hours. So fairly aggressive firing schedule on these guys, so they pretty much always get hot. On top of that, this guy has probably seen about 60% steel and only about 40% brass, so I've been fairly aggressive with it, and still no malfunctions like I mentioned. But we're also going to talk about barrel wear on this guy. Now, the barrel on here is, I believe, the M4 profile, so it has kind of the weird cuts on it, for of course the M4, which I don't really like. It makes for a very odd looking barrel, and it's also very, very lightweight. So a downside of that is, well, a good side of that is that it's lightweight, so it's very easy to maneuver and to shoot with, all that sort of good stuff, even for a 16-inch barrel. But the bad thing is that it heats up really fast, and so you're going to lose accuracy faster, and it's going to overall be a little bit less accurate than more rigid barrels that have a little bit heavier of a profile. That being said though, I have done accuracy testing on all of my guns, and on this guy specifically, actually I got the best group I've ever got, which was three rounds pretty much touching each other at 103 yards using 69 grain Sierra Match King bullets loaded by ADI. Really good group that I got out of it, but later on, you know, a year and a half later, I wanted to see how is it still performing. So I went ahead and did a 5-round group with some PPU, 69 grain ammunition, and once again I got 3 rounds to pretty much touch each other at 100 yards, and the other 2 were just slightly off. So it's still, I would say, with good ammunition, with a little bit better of an optic. We're just running a 1:8 on here, and that's what I did the accuracy test with. With a little bit better of an optic, or for a little bit better grouping, that sort of thing, because this has a 1 MOA dot, so it's difficult to get really precise with it. With a little bit better optic, with the good ammo, good trigger pulls, all that sort of good stuff, you're looking at around 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and that's what this gun is. It can of course get better groups, fluke groups, that sort of things, but generally speaking, this is 1 inch to 1.5 inches gun, and even after 5,000 rounds, aggressive firing schedules, and mostly steel, about 60% steel I would say, it's still holding that inch and a half accuracy. One of my only complaints about this upper receiver is that I'm not really a big fan of the barrel profile, and I would have of course rather had a mid-length gas system than a carbine length gas system. Other than that, everything on it has been pretty much flawless. The handguard that we have on here is of course an M-LOK handguard. It's a 15-inch handguard, so it's super long, so if you're putting lights, lasers, iron sights, it's good for all that sort of stuff to give you the most, the longest sight radius of course, and it's also mounted really well. Now it's mounted using a little bit of an older system, so it uses a 6 screw method that screws into your barrel nut, so it's very rigid and very strong, and you're never really going to lose 0 on a rail, unless of course you dent the rail or actually manage to bend the rail somehow, but the rails are fairly strong, so it'd be very difficult to do that. Now I actually lost one of the screws on the rail itself, one of the bottom ones here, and that's just, I lost it, didn't lose it from the factory. So these guys here are all Loctited down. The mounting method, it's not very fast, so if you wanted to change it out for something else, it's definitely slower to do, a little bit more obnoxious to work on, but it's very strong, and so I actually like it because I don't really mess with the rails all that much. Something else that people may not like about the rail is that it only has M-LOK slots at the 3, 6, and 9 position, which really isn't a big deal for me, but if you're someone who likes to have M-LOK positions all the way around for mounting your different things that you need on there, this might not be a good rail for you. Another thing is that the rail is 15 inches long, so it's a very long rail, which is good for most people, whereas for me, I like to leave a little bit of room at the end of my barrel because I would like to have the weight balance a little bit further backwards, and so the less rail I have out the front means it's easier to get onto my muzzle device, whatever else I'm switching out on it, so it makes it a little bit easier in that regard. So now that we've talked about the barrel and the handguard, the barrel is still retained its accuracy for the most part. It will definitely start wearing out over the next 5,000 rounds, so if I do a 10,000 round review on this guy, the groups I would imagine will start to open up because of the, once again, aggressive firing schedule. I get it pretty hot when I'm shooting it, and I do a lot of steel, which is harder on barrels. But back here, let's go ahead and talk about the bolt carrier group. Now, after filming the intro of this video, I went ahead and I cleaned it out, so it's cleaned very well. And I'll show you close-ups of all of this stuff so you can kind of see exactly what I'm talking about. But you see your normal wear and tear on a bolt. Now this is a Milspec bolt. It's MP tested, it's HPI tested, so it's fairly good in those regards for testing wise. There's nothing about it that really gives you any sort of red flags. The staking on the top on the gas key is fairly good. So all the things that you need to look for in a bolt carrier group are all there. Now, after 5,000 rounds, running pretty harsh for the first 3,000 to 4,000 rounds, you do pretty much have no anodizing left because this is a nitrited bolt. You do pretty much have no nitriting left on the contact surfaces, on all 4 of the major contact surfaces on your bolt. It's pretty much all gone at this point. On the cam pin itself, you'll also see that pretty much all of the nitriting on it is gone just from locking and unlocking so many times. Now, one thing that I haven't really done on this guy is clean the bolt as often as I should, the actual bolt, not necessarily the bolt carrier. So on the back of the bolt is a ton of carbon buildup. Now, I haven't replaced the gas rings on this guy, and it's still cycling just fine, so I'm really not going to replace them until that becomes an issue. But that is some sort of preventative maintenance that you can do to your gun. The front of the bolt, all of the locking lugs where they actually lock and unlock, the nitriding is gone on that. The face of the bolt itself is pretty much all gone as well. That being said though, nothing has broke on it. Nothing has needed to be replaced on it. Everything still seems to be functioning very, very well. So for an inexpensive Milspec bolt, I think you can buy these guys for like 60, 70 bucks just by themselves when they're in stock. Everything is looking really, really good on it, except for the back of the bolt where all that carbon buildup is, and that's just because I haven't cleaned it properly. And the last part is of course just the Milspec upper receiver itself. Now there's nothing really special about it. It's just a very, very standard Milspec upper receiver. You can buy them for 30 to 40 bucks depending if you get them on a good deal. There's literally nothing special about it, but it's held up well. Everything on it functions really well. It has your forward assist, which makes some people really happy. So all that is there, and really there's nothing to really report about it. Now, due to the design of this guy, it's not necessarily the lightest weight upper. The mounting system on here is a little bit heavier, and it requires your barrel nut to be timed properly, which generally speaking they do from the factory, so I don't have to do that at all. But if you were to take the barrel out and put something else on it, you would have to re-time the barrel nut to make sure that your rail mounts properly, or go with a different rail entirely. The barrel nut that they have on here is a steel barrel nut. It's fairly heavy, which is good and bad. It soaks up a lot of heat, holds the barrel in place very well, which is good. But just because of the mounting solution on here, it can be a little bit more tricky if you are swapping out barrels. That being said, I will probably have to swap out barrels in the next 5,000 rounds, and I'll probably go with something maybe like a heavier profile barrel in 14.5 with a pinion welded muzzle brake on it, or not a muzzle brake, a flash hider on it, kind of like I have right now. That's really one of the only changes that I'm going to do in the near future. So this upper receiver, I really like it. It's a really good rifle upper receiver if you're looking for a 16-inch build. The only reason that I shoot the 10.5, which is right behind me right there, more than this guy, is just the fact that it's more fun to shoot because it's running the same carbine length gas system in a 10.5 barrel, so you have 6 inches shorter of a barrel. It's a little bit lighter. The guns are about the same accuracy wise, but because it's so much lighter and shorter, so it's balanced a little bit better, it's a lot more fun to run and gun with, so I end up shooting that guy more than this guy. Now if this guy had a different barrel on here and a little bit longer of a gas system, and the recoil was noticeably different, then this guy here might be a little bit more fun to shoot, even though you're dealing with a less balanced gun and a little bit heavier of a gun. So that's the only reason that I shoot the 10.5 more. It's not that it's more reliable. I've actually had a couple failures in that guy, which I've never had in this guy. That being said, generally speaking, the longer the barrel on a 223/5.56 and an AR-15, you're going to get a little bit better reliability out of it. Most people agree that a 20-inch AR-15 with a rifle length gas system, like the guy on the far right there, is going to be the most reliable. So with that all being out of the way, I really like this upper receiver. It's accurate enough. It's definitely reliable enough, especially with all the abuse that I put it through. I really, really like it. So let's go ahead and talk about the setup that I have on here. Most of the stuff you've all seen before. The iron sights are steel Trinity Force iron sights, which are really good. They have a really stiff lock up and lock down, so there's almost no wobble in them, which I like. For a cheap iron sight, you can get them for around 20 to 30 bucks, probably even less than that if you look really hard. The optic on here is one that I use on a lot of my guns. It's the UTG AccuShot 128. This one here has a BG4 reticle, which is good. It's ballistically matched with 55 grain 5.56, and it actually does line up. I've used it on my ACR over there out to 400 yards in a 3-gun competition, and it lines up perfectly. So using the ballistic reticle in it works really well. And of course, 1 to 8 gives you a lot of different options from really close to really far. I've taken both of these guys out to 500 yards, no problem. Now, so that's the optic. The mount is also the UTG AccuSync mount, and it's pretty much the best mount that's out there for the money. I don't think there is a better mount for 30 or 40 bucks that's as strong, as lightweight, that mounts up as tightly as this guy does to the rail. Now up front we have a fairly simple, this is a Feyachi light. This is a 1200 lumen, just a simple white light. It's fairly simple. You can find them on Amazon for like 40 or 50 bucks. They work pretty well. It's sitting in a 1-inch offset mount, so it fits my hand really well. The hand stop on the bottom, this is also just UTG. It's one of their made in America, I believe it's 6061 anodized aluminum, and it fits really well. It's a little M-lock thing, and it's very minimalistic. It's a little bit smaller form factor than the BCM CAG, which is my favorite one, and it's slightly heavier just because it's made out of aluminum versus polymer, but it is a slightly smaller package than the CAG, so it takes up a little bit less space. The muzzle device on here is kind of an odd combo that I bought off of eBay from a while ago. It's a 6-prong flash hider, but it also has a ring in it, so it does some compensating. So when you're using Wolf or Tula ammunition through a 16-inch barrel, They have, generally speaking, a little bit slower burning powders, so you are going to get some flash at the end. However, when you're using high quality brass ammunition where the powder burns a little faster, you're not going to get that issue, and it actually works fairly well as a flash hider, and it really doesn't do anything as a compensator. Last up on the upper receiver is I'm using a Magpul offset. This is actually meant for a QD sling, but I actually don't have a QD point on this sling, so I'm literally just putting the hooks inside of the QD swivel mount, and it works just fine. It marks it up, but I don't really care about it. It was like 15 bucks. So all in all, this upper receiver back in the day, you could probably build it for $350 to $400, depending on what you were putting on it. But now you're probably looking at about $500 just because the upper receiver has gone up in price, and depending on where you can find everything else, your optic selection, all that sort of good stuff. Now, something that I should mention is that that upper receiver on the right, the rifle one, was actually sent to me by Bear Creek Arsenal. I do know some of the guys out there, and they've talked to me a little bit. But this one here and the 10.5 were both bought a year and a half ago with my own money, and shot with all my own ammunition, all that sort of good stuff. So I don't have any sort of bias towards Bear Creek Arsenal. I bought them back then because they were literally the cheapest, or I should say the best value upper receivers that had decent reviews on them. But I'm the type of guy who goes through my rifles and really modifies everything about them and the way they recoil and the way they cycle. So for instance, on here, you know, we have an adjustable gas block on both of these AR-15s. Then I also went in and changed out the buffer system in the back to make them cycle a little bit smoother. So there are things that you can do to improve the reliability of your guns, and it's something that I generally do whenever I get something. But if you're somebody who just wants something to run out of the box, these guys did run out of the box for me, no problem. So that was pretty much it for the video. That was the 5,000 round review of this Bear Creek Arsenal 16-inch rifle upper receiver. It's worked excellently for me, or I should say perfectly for me. I've never had an issue with it, but of course your mileage may vary. That being said though, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think of this down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.
Hey you. Yeah, you. What are you still doing here? The video's over. Wait. Why are you still here? Like, share, and subscribe. Or don't. The choice is yours. But if you do subscribe, thanks. And I like pizza. Peace off.